Alkaline.
My hair falls out.
Is this going to grow?
You look like Michael and
Is this going to grow purple rhododendron?
Okay, sorry, guys, we're actually live streaming now. So solved our technical difficulties. Excuse me, councillors. We're now live streaming and we're on board. So I just want to have us upstanding. Thank you. Just remind everybody that this is being webcast and those in attendance should refrain from making any defamatory statements, but I know you won't. You're well behaved. Acknowledgement to country. I acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral land of the Ngunnawal people. I recognise the Ngunnawal as the traditional custodians and pay respects to the elders of the community and their descendants. Prayer. Let us be still and remember the presence of God. As we commence our meeting, let us together pray for guidance and help. Almighty God, we ask your blessing on this council. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the true welfare of Australia and the people of Yass Valley. Amen. Thank you very much. Apologies, Alison Harker is on her way and will be trying to zoom in depending on her signal strength, but she will be joining us later in the meeting. So just note that she, when she joins, maybe at the end. Declarations of pecuniary interests or special disclosures. Does anyone have any? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have two. The first is item 7.3, which is a lease request. I am the president of Yass FM, who is the likely lessee if it is carried, and so I have a non-pecuniary but significant interest. The second one is item 8.6, which is the draft procurement and disposal policy. I've been offered the use of this computer, which is becoming an old computer. I now understand that that offer is dependent on the passing of the procurement policy in there, and so therefore I would suggest that I have a pecuniary interest in passing it, and so I will absent myself from the vote.
Can we get clarification on that, Madam Mayor? I would suggest that it would be no different to us passing or failing to pass a rates increase or decrease. It applies to generally to all disposal of assets, not just an iPad or a phone or a biro. Surely it would come under the same heading, so that's through to the General Manager, I suppose.
Madam Mayor, my understanding is that the equipment you've got has got a zero value. It's depreciated so much, so you're not gaining or losing anything. The organisation is not gaining or losing anything as a result of it being depreciated down to zero. So arguably, you're not getting any pecuniary advantage out of that component of the policy for that type of equipment. It would be very different for perhaps another asset that did have some value.
So, given that, would all councillors then, would we treat it like rates, or do we actually declare a non-pecuniary, non-significant?
You could do that. You could.
Then we can participate in the vote.
Yeah,
or should we be treating it like we would rates or anything else that where we increase a charge that is applicable to us?
Treat it like rates.
That's what I would say.
Decides on what to do.
Yeah.
I'm happy to take advice on that. If everyone feels that you need to declare a non-significant, non-pecuniary and stay in the meeting to vote, because we actually have to vote on a policy, and it's a policy that covers everything else in council as well. I believe we have to stay in.
We have to stay in, and that's what I'm suggesting, is that if we can make a note that the discussion was held on non-pecuniary, non-significant for all 9 councillors.
All 8, because Councillor Ferry's already handed his back.
Madam Mayor, can I make a non-declaration that as someone who's already handed in their device and has full laptops, I will be voting in that particular item.
One's
And-
on the
I would say, Madam Mayor, that potentially that is a factor in this, is whether or not councillors will take up keeping their iPad as well.
But it's no value.
Through Madam Mayor, there is one other option. You can leave the decision on that policy to me after the after the third.
No, I don't like deferring.
Well, the thing is, you've already given the general manager delegation for that period between the
And the
4th of
council.
December and the 12th of January, because there is no elected representative during that period, but the organisation still has to function. So that decision could be made under delegation if you were uncomfortable with dealing with it this evening, or if we don't get a quorum.
What's your dilemma?
You have to do something now, otherwise.
No, we're put in a position by Councillor Frost because
No, we make our own decisions,
but given that it's a non-significant, non-pecuniary, I will be participating in the debate. I'm happy to fill a form in accordance with that.
I am too, just for probity, it's fine. We just fill out a form saying it's non-pecuniary, non-significant, so we can actually have a vote on the policy. Councillor Turner.
You'll do the same thing, Jim?
All right, so that's, is all councillors happy to have that happen?
I'll stay with what I've indicated.
Councillor Frost has got it.
Councillor Frost's got his own decision, and Councillor Ferry doesn't have a declaration.
Then you can send it to the chair.
Okay, any others at this point? Back to where we are.
You know what?
Well, he can vote.
We get another one. We get another one anyway next time, won't we?
No, we'll be back there, we'll be back there.
All right, councillors, come on, we're ticking along. Any other declarations of pecuniary interest? I have one for item 6.6 due to a relationship with the proponent. So it's a non-significant, non-pecuniary, but I shall be stepping out of the meeting for that decision. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, moving along. Minutes of the confirmation of the minutes of the ordinary council meeting 27th of October, and also if we could combine them together with the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 1st of November. So moved, Councillor Furry, seconded Councillor Reid. Thank you. Any questions or issues arising out of that aren't taken up later? Councillor Frost?
Yes, Madam Mayor, it's my memory that item 7.8, additional spaces allocation request for Telstra electric vehicles, it's my memory that I voted against that, but I'm recorded. I was surprised to find that I voted for it.
Okay, so with that amendment, if we could just
Could I
note.
have that amended, please?
A correction's been made.
Okay, so just noting that, all those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. If we can move to the Director of Planning Environment's report, I'll run through 1 to 7. 6.1. 6.2. Oh, okay. Groundlands miscellaneous reserves draft management plan. Climate change and natural disaster risk assessment. Development consent, 101 lot subdivision, 101 lot subdivision, Isabella Drive, Murrumbateman. Development consent, preschool 37 Church Street, Yass. I've got a couple of comments in there. We'll have to leave DA because I'm leaving, and then 6.7 alcohol-free zone. There was a slight amendment to a recommendation potentially. All right, can I have a mover and seconder for 6.2, 6.3 and 6.4? So move Councillor Ferry, Councillor Reid, thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Back to 6.1, I think Councillor Jones may have had a, happy you want to move it?
Happy to
or-
move.
Thank you, can I have a seconder please? Councillor Turner, thank you.
I just wanted to congratulate staff and community for an excellent process, and watching the fine tuning of this master plan with feedback is just excellent. I looked with interest at the skate park because I knew a lot needed to be done. and wasn't quite sure how that would look. I'm so glad you've got some terrific feedback there. And also in the dog park too. I just thought that was a very basic infrastructure that we got off the ground there. It was a very new thing for Yass Valley Council at the time to consider that, and it's been really, really well used, and these improvements will go a long way to making that a much more loved facility. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against it? Councillor Frost?
Could I just note that the plan, even as amended, doesn't specifically state that allow for an amenities block near the dog park and beginning the tours. Although I understand that that's a possibility that may happen when we have a heated pool placed in that area. Could I encourage future people thinking about that to think if they can please do that and include those in there. I don't think it precludes it, it just hasn't included it yet.
Okay, thank you. Any speakers for or against? All right, all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. Moving to 6.5, Development Consent Church Street. Yes, I think Councillor McManus had a hand waving there on stage. And Councillor Frost, would you be happy to move it? Or?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to move it.
I went to Councillor McManus first because that was the hand I saw first.
Was for a second or whatever, yeah.
Yes, all right.
Just a couple of questions.
Do you want to move it or not first?
With the reduction in the car parks,
You're not moving it yet.
so I don't know so I would like just to discuss car parking and traffic movements. There wasn't, in the report there wasn't enough detail. We've got no right turn out. Should we also have a no right turn in? Which would make traffic movement along Church Street better. So all vehicle movements in are left and all vehicles out are left. So you're not crossing Church Street. So it's a question. And which would also allow some sort of on-street drop-off. But the thing with Montessori is that you actually present your children at the door, so you'll need a limited number of car parks. I noticed in the report there was some discussion about staggering hours. Have they been included in the detail of the in the application? So there's a couple there, if you don't mind just having a discussion on, because so one is traffic movements in and out, so no right turn across Church Street, so you come in from the left and you go out to the left. That's practical, and also the reduction of the numbers, whether reduction in 5 or reduction by 7, which would allow them to put additional 2 big trees in the car parking area. They'll never fill the 18 car parks.
So,
It's not the way the organisation works.
through that, Councillor McManus, do you want to add those comments to the recommendation? So something like modified development consent is to remain under a deferred development subject to the contamination report and conditions relating to.
I assume the development, I was having the contamination report will be looking purely at groundwater and asbestos remnants, is that correct?
Yes.
There's nothing else that the contamination report's going to be delving into? It's just remnant, but
No, they will look what the previous uses of the land have been and they'll formulate the testing based around that. So they usually do like a preliminary site investigation and they do the detail.
Yeah.
But I would suspect that most of it will be around asbestos.
asbestos and groundwater.
Yeah.
So the other two, just a comment on the other two, probably from the engineering. But it's a better way of managing traffic, that's all.
Yep, so through Madam Mayor, the plan at this point in time is or my preference for this point in time is to manage as we build, so that we can, manage into the future. So right turn in, right turn, or left turn in, left turn out are administrative issues that can be dealt with into the future. I believe that this will most likely end up in So my assessment of this is that this will most likely end up in more on-street drop-offs, which will require, as the site grows, additional administrative management procedures. So left in, left out, potentially double white lines down the centre of Church Street, additional parking controls, potentially 10-minute parking in certain areas of certain parts of Church Street during certain hours, and those type of things. But trying to put those in now and manage those for a 30-person preschool, 30-child preschool, when we don't fully understand how it's going to react is probably
Early.
So I prefer to do those through the local traffic committee, knowing that these type of things would happen. The other thing I've looked at as far as this one, the footpath. So that street is a pretty dodgy, I shouldn't say dodgy. The footpath along that area is challenging as it is. So one of the conditions I've looked at is actually formalising that footpath for the full length of Church Street on that block, connecting Mann Street and Leeds Street, because there's footpaths on there, as opposed to the additional car parks. And that gives people the ability to move through and use the footpaths to bring children to school. My concern, probably like most people's concern, is if you use that car park a lot, it's actually the most likely thing people are going to do is park on the street and bring their children in. That car park then becomes a danger to bringing children in. So I'm all for not increasing the size of that car park. I'm happy with where it is. I think that's appropriate given the number of students that are likely to be there, not just the number of students, but also the number of teachers and educators that are likely to be there and visitors to the site. I think that's an appropriate size car park because you're not blocking up the street with permanent people, and the street then becomes the place for pick up and drop off. And so, but those are administrative procedures that have no impact on the large scale construction work that needs to be done, and planning as we go, so they can be done into the future. But we've looked at, I think the conditions for this one, we've looked at increasing the length of the footpath, width of footpath, formalising the line marking, and we'll also look at formalising parking as part of that line marking out the front of the preschool. That can then be addressed through the local traffic committee with signage later if it becomes an issue for parking there. Is that?
So if we approve, if the decision is to approve this, we're accepting it with the 18 spaces provided by the applicant.
Yes.
Yeah. So we don't need to include that because we're accepting making the decision, we're accepting what the applicant's provided. That is a variation on the code.
So do I have a mover, Councillor Mellis? Yes, I do, thank you, and a seconder, Councillor Frost, thank you. Councillor Jones, speaking for or against, yes.
Speaking for it with the 18, when they're going for grants, having that 90 placement is really important. So if we mess with that, it's going to cascade and make things a bit challenging for them. It's like, that location is going to have issues anyway, regardless. You've got Barimba one end, you've got TAFE next door, so there's a lot of traffic movements there at the moment anyway. I feel for the residents in terms of their concerns on that street, because over on Orion, next to the Yass pre-kindergarten, and through the traffic committee, we've had complaints about the traffic management there, with not enough car parks and people parking across the road on verges and lawns and dangerous behaviour. Obviously, this one has got a few years yet before we have to really look at the most complex problem of actual 90 kids on site. But there could be some really interesting changes below towards the Soldiers Club. If we can access that, that's a big change. And certainly, parents accessing the CBD, if they park close to the CBD, drop kids off, and then they're back on foot to get to the main street, also has some good implications for the town Main Street businesses too.
Anybody else wish to speak for or against it? Okay, I'll put the motion as it stands. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Moving to 6.6, and I shall vacate the chair. So many things to dodge around.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 6.6, councillors, I understand that Councillor Jones,
Yeah, I have a different motion to put forward.
do you have a seconder?
So what is, which one?
Yeah, no, it is, yeah, you might wanna.
Be surprised.
So the gist of your motion, Councillor Jones.
Concerned that I'm squinting that clear.
Okay, let me just start talking while we bring it up. So I'm opting for a deferred commencement, and that it be issued for the gully rehab on the basis of requiring the applicant to provide to the satisfaction of council a revised gully rehab plan, a tree management plan, a revised survey site, which labels the major contours, design plans to be submitted which confirm the final landform, including those major contours which were raised as a concern as to how much fill might be needed, engineering drawings and calculations associated with the construction of rocks or concrete flumes and the diversion banks, and engineering drawings for the construction of the internal access road.
You do have to
Call for a seconder.
conditional or conditional
Deferred commencement.
Deferred commencement.
Yeah, so we issue a deferred commencement. So they've got to meet all these bars before.
So basically all that information, all the information in the dot points up there has to be provided prior to the consent, prior to the operation of the consent and the actual work on the site.
Before we go into debate, councillors, Councillor Turner, thank you, seconder.
So if I can just briefly talk to that. For example, the gully rehab plan. If that's in first, you've got included in situ soil test and provides a plan of how soil chemistry will be managed as necessary. And the risk of rock flume failure and scouring including as a result of dispersal soils. So I think this is addressing a lot of the concerns that the residents have, and if we put that bar before the applicant, that they've got to meet these beforehand, I think we'll go a long way to satisfying some of these concerns. That a tree management plan be prepared by a suitably qualified and experienced person, with details of species, health, life expectancy and structural stability. And that any recommendations for measures necessary to ensure the ongoing health of the trees. Now, I want to also talk about the reasons that I think that we should put forward this DA for approval with deferment of with deferment. I know it's not everyone's favourite option. We all preferred a different one in the recommendation from John Crackman. We all preferred a different one. However, we can't ask them to do something that's not before us. We can only assess what's before us, and we have to determine whether or not this is suitable, whether it meets all the other land uses, is it compatible, and is it what they say it is? Is it for environmental works? Now, I believe it is for the actual environmental works. I think that we do have a gully there. I mean, we've seen pictures previously. It's significant and it is eroding, and this is a method of dealing with it. It is permissible under our EPA, under our environmental plan 2013, sorry. We can limit the number of vehicles to 8 per day. I just want to make sure that we've got the VPA included. Is that on this one?
I didn't see it there.
Let's just make sure it's there. Yes, and a further report be presented to council on the draft terms of the voluntary planning agreement. So one of the questions that we've put to our director is what will be the impact of those 8 truck movements for 300 odd days of the year? And the result is it'll halve the life of that road. And $6,000 is not acceptable by any person's calculation of what we would need to get to even do minor repairs on that road. And we have a new haulage plan that will hopefully into the future give us the income to actually deal with the impact on the roads, which will be $500,000 in this case. I think what the applicant is offering is a way forward for us to actually make some, minor repairs to that road as this project is going forward. Would I like $500,000? Yes, I would. I think that would be great if we could do this project like that, but it's not. We don't have that tool in place, and that will be for future DAs coming in. I think that the areas of safety concern that have been identified during the assessment can be appropriately addressed through the development consent, including limiting the number of heavy vehicles, requiring the centre line to be marked on the road, requiring the pavement to be fixed, and requiring a transport plan to be developed. I think the volume of the materials can be ensured through conditions of development consent. And I don't consider that this will have impact on terrestrial biodiversity. It's one gully. I think we need to be realistic about what this project is. It's not covering the entire block like we've seen in some. And I've already mentioned that there should be a tree management plan, and that they should be protected during the earthworks. So I think we have a way forward that gives us enough checks and balances early in the project, and we've already adopted some of the conditions from our previous Brooklands one of measured steps at the 6-month mark, which Councillor Frost introduced into the previous Brooklands DA. So we've already captured some of those extra protections that we set a precedent with the previous one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Frost, and then I have 3 questions here for the Director of Planning. Councillor Frost.
Yeah, well, I have a question, if I may, of the mover. I'm trying to understand what the deferment actually means. Does that mean it actually comes back to the new council to make a decision on those? If that's the case, then we might as well not make a decision at all. Yeah, so I'm just trying to work out what's the next. Eh?
No, they're technical requirements. The answer is no. That's council specifies what extra information is needed of a technical nature to allow the consent to be operational. That information comes back to the technical staff to basically be assured that information is as per your deferred matters. That's how it's been operating for the last 7 years at least that I can think of.
And Councillor Frost, I'm instructed that they have 5 years in which to bring all this information forward. To start.
They have a time period to actually submit the information, and then there is a time limit on when they have to start.
So I'll take Councillor Jones standing up and speaking as in response to the question rather than closing the debate.
Well, I asked the question.
Thank you. Councillor McManus.
What's the difference between a conditional development consent and granting consent subject to those reports? Surely that would be the same outcome, which is what we were asked to do, approve it. We're here till, as councillors, till whatever it is, 6 or 7 o'clock tonight. We shouldn't be postponing things just to postpone things. That's why if we have to make a decision, then we should make a decision tonight. So that's why I'm not uncomfortable with those reports. Some of them, the applicant will be doing it as we speak because it's important for him to get this right. It's his property or her property. She'll want to make sure that it is done correctly. So a lot of those things will be done as a matter of course. So why wouldn't we grant conditional development consent and that these documents be provided as opposed to deferring commencement or we should be saying, yes, do it, but you must do this first. So
So you're not deferring the consent. a deferred commencement consent is an actual consent. It's a legal document. It just means that that information that the matter's deferred must come in before it turns from a deferred commencement consent into an operational consent. It's just the way the Act is set up. You're not deferring the decision making, you're making a decision to issue a consent. But the condition is that you're applying says that it can't be operational until these matters have been addressed. So that's how a deferred commencement consent works. It's still a consent. It's still a decision of the council.
Can I raise?
Great consent.
So that is your choice. You could issue a consent with those requirements, or you could issue a deferred commencement consent with those requirements for the information coming in.
Jamie said it's no deal.
Okay, councillors, can I suggest that when you're speaking, please stand. Thank you for your question, Councillor Menace. The questions that were directed to the Director of Planning were relating to, there's an understanding that some additional work was undertaken as a part of a peer review that came through, including a question that came up in open forum around sodic soils, and in addition to that, an update, considering what we're looking at, an update in general on compliance and enforcement activities. Thank you, Director.
Thank you for the question. So there was a peer review submitted by one of the objectors, essentially reviewing the technical report that was submitted by the applicant. It's referred to as the McLeod report by the objectors. And so essentially we received that just as the report was being finalised to council. We have taken that report, and I'll just note that that report doesn't say that that gully filling is not an alternative. It says that it is an option for gully rehabilitation, subject to certain things occurring. We took the information from the peer review, we analysed it against the report that we had written and the development consent that the draft conditions that have been put together, and we made adjustments to the report and the draft consent on the basis of some of the information that was in the peer review. I feel that information has been raised in the peer review has been adequately considered in the report and has been picked up in the draft conditions. Just in relation to the issue of the sodic soils, so the peer review does make comments about sodic soils, and from that report we have taken or are requiring that there is an in situ soil test undertaken as part of the revised gully rehabilitation report, and a plan to manage soil chemistry. Any problems can be required prior to the commencement of works. I just note for the council that under the LEP we have mapping of saline land and high soil erodibility, and the property is not identified in either of those mapping layers. And just in relation to the compliance action, I'll just get my paperwork. So, as council's aware, we now have on staff a senior compliance officer. He's been here for approximately 2 months. In that time, he's undertaken 19 property inspections, which have been the subject of complaints. The majority of these have been in Wallaroo, Spring Range and Sutton. In this financial year, we've issued 6 notices relating to prevention and clean-up requirements under the POEO Act. In addition to the compliance, the actual in-the-field compliance work, he has also had meetings with the surrounding local government areas to coordinate an approach for dumping and filling. We've currently got a draft MOU that's circulating with those councils for joint approaches to compliance and information sharing. We're continuing to engage with the ACT government on the filling issues, including requesting information from them relating to consents that they've issued and how they've requested the soil that's excavated from sites be managed. we're undertaking covert surveillance of properties on a regular basis. And we're starting work on looking at the compliance framework and the enforcement policy, which the enforcement policy was identified in Council's operational plan for review in this financial year.
Thank
Is
you,
that
Erica.
satisfactory?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Reid.
I'd like to speak against the motion. I have a problem. We have three options. One is to pass the DA, one is to not pass the DA, and the other one is to defer it for the next council to have a look at. We've had a request from people who might be on the council for the deferral because they feel that they should be involved in this. I don't think we should be deferring anything. I think we're still a council and we should make a decision tonight. In terms of not approving the DA, I don't think we should not approve the DA, sorry, too many negatives there. But at the same time, I have some serious reservations about approving the DA as it stands at the moment. There's a number of issues that have cropped up. One is amenability and what that means and what a development of this size will do to amenity. We have no metrics that we can give to our planning people to say this is what we mean by that. So I appreciate that we can't really take that into consideration at this stage. The truck movements though, that depends on the amount of material that's going to go into the site. And we don't know how much material is really required for this site until we get some of these reports back. So we do really need to get these reports before we should be agreeing to the amount of material to come in. Compliance is an issue, I think. It has been in the past. I know we're trying to address that as a council, but our means of compliance is reactive. We allow the truck movement, the fill to be dumped, then we go and check it out. We don't have a process where we can check what's going in before it gets to the site. That concerns me. I think we somehow or other as a council need to start looking at how we might be able to be more proactive. And part of that is to know exactly where the soil is coming from and have it approved before it even gets in the trucks. And again, I think that's not a matter that we can solve tonight. The soil type is something of concern to me because if we blanketly approve this and the wrong soil type comes in, it's just going to add to the problem, not solve it. And again, going back to the quantity, that affects the number of truck movements. If we can have a look at this and then somehow or other come to an agreement with the person that they don't need as much as fill as they're expecting, then that will go some way to assuaging, is that the right word, the fears of a lot of the residents. And the biodiversity, I don't think there's I can't really, I haven't been on site, so I can't really comment on that. So I do have some reservations about that, and I don't think we're covering it off in this motion as it is. And I'd certainly like to get a handle on how much material is supposed to be on site before we make that decision. So, yep.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Bear with me, please. My initial reaction when I saw this was one of abject horror. It goes against everything that I believe in this community, and I believe it's wrong for the community. However, it's equally wrong that we don't exercise some control on it. I worked on the principle when you're faced with a conundrum, check the facts. We have at least 2 legal opinions that are divergent. We have at least 2 soil opinions that are divergent. It's very sad that we no longer have the Soil Conservation Service, which was a New South Wales government service, which was non-financial, no financial gain. And of course, the very respected John Franklin was part of that earlier on. I have a plan on my wall of a property that I bought in the 60s, which was a whole plan. It had contour lines, it had dams, it had erosion control on 2,000 acres in the Mullion, and it was achieved without importing one single cubic metre of soil. The prospect of 63,000 tonnes fills me with horror. And I believe we are duty bound to ensure that all of these are considered before they're told that they can go ahead. I think the VPA is a step in the right direction, and I would not have been voting for this if it had been anything else other than a deferred commencement. I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Are there, Councillor Frost?
Thank you, Mr Deputy Mayor. A bit of realpolitik. We don't have we aren't able to stop this soil coming across the border. Wish we could, we wouldn't have it. Wouldn't be an issue if we could stop it. We don't have that capacity because one of two things will happen. This has been lodged under a particular set of rules that says it can be done and we can either work within those rules to get it done properly, or we can reject this motion tonight, and what will happen was one of two things. We'll either go to we'll be taken to the Land and Environment Court, where the rules will be sorted out, bang, 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 and all of these things that we've put into to control and to manage and whatever, they'll be lost. Let's have a simple transport over, dump, level it out a bit. All they'll have to do, I suspect they'll do more because it is their own land after all, and we sometimes tend to forget that. The other option is that they simply do what a lot of other people are doing and what Wallaroo people are concerned about quite rightly, which is that the trucks will just come and they'll quietly dump it here, there and everywhere, probably not on this site because it'll be noticed now, but dump it on a site somewhere else. We don't have the capacity to say no, nothing going to happen. We have the capacity to influence at this stage. In the slightly longer term, this council, and one of the really good things that this council has done, and through the planning department, has been to put in the heavy haulage scheme. Now we're a little bit hoisting our own petard with that because the heavy haulage scheme means that if anything else is put into here using this, it's going to cost the applicant somewhere around about $400,000, even after the $60,000 is taken into account. Now that's a lot of legal fees, if you think about it. There's a lot of incentive there for someone to take it to the Land and Environment Court if we reject it. And as I say, it's our own medium-term sensible planning to try and restrict the amount of damage. But even if, and bearing in mind, as I said before, what we shouldn't have any of this soil coming over because we don't get anything out of it. If we collect $460,000 to fix a road and we fix the road and it ends up the way it was at the beginning, and from a council point of view, we get nothing. Under this one, we're actually going to lose money, but we don't have the capacity to stop it. If we have, we won't even get the 60,000. We won't even get the 7,000 if it's dumped illegally. There's only one way that we can actually stop this, and that's if it's stopped at source, and the people that are managing it at source stop it. And that is the ACT government, which has the capacity to actually prevent this. And this council is reacting to a situation that's been created by a group by the ACT government, which has looked at its own needs and its own constituency and said, we don't really mind if the dirt goes over the border. We don't want it on our place. We'll charge you a fortune to dump it on our place. We don't really mind very much, and we're not going to help to stop it coming over the border. So that's where the real problem is. And fighting amongst ourselves about the bits and pieces here really doesn't make any sense. there's a saying that perfect is the enemy of the good. And we've had lots of submissions about what would be the perfect answer. We can't get the perfect answer, and if we keep going for it, we won't even get a good answer. And this is a good answer. So I'll be supporting it. I commend the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Knowing that I'm in the chair, it's very difficult for me to make comment. Councillor Burgess, and then that's every councillor, I think, has made a comment.
As a landowner, I've got a lot of land, and with this gully, I think should be allowed to dump the stuff there. It's better dumping them in a gully and doing it properly than they're just dumping at that deep over good farming land, which they are doing everywhere, out our way and all through there everywhere. And that's what they're doing, and in the other shires too. So I think it's best to do this way, and I recommend. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor McManus, a question.
Is there an integrated plan between 64 and 66 Brooklands Road? And if there isn't, then are we in a position to add that to the list of reports that come through? Because I believe they're side by side,
It's the same.
the same catchment, same drainage lines, and it would be, I think it would be appropriate.
I don't think you can.
No, so.
So the problem is that this is a gully, and gully's based on catchments.
I totally agree.
And I just think if there is a way of whether we can enforce it or whether we can ask for it, I actually think there needs to be consideration of the catchment management between 64 and 66, which all up's about 400 acres of catchment, and to make sure that the two plans are integrated. Now, I would imagine that the two applicants, or the applicant and the developer who's already got his, that those two would need to be talking anyway. I just think it's worth considering that we somehow get some sort of integration between the two plans. I know we can't impose conditions on both, but I think it's important that we try and ask for it. Or seek it.
Councillors, for a second time, there is one person speaking. There will not be interjection from other councillors, and I don't think that's funny. Thank you.
I think, I know you used to late demands and late reports. Apparently you're working through till midnight last night doing this one, but there's one at the 1 o'clock hour, not the 12th. I just think it's important that you have something
So
that integrates the two plans.
council approved the development application for the gully rehabilitation at 66 Brooklands
Is that
Road earlier in the year.
Pardon me, which one's above and which one's below?
66 is below.
The 66 has already been
So
approved.
that was the 8,000 cubic metres from memory.
Yeah, so
And I'm pretty sure from memory that the same consultant on the technical aspects of that development is the same for this one for 64 Brooklands Road. I think it's actually mentioned in the council report.
it is.
And I'm reasonably confident that both proposals speak to each other.
Well,
Understand what I mean?
and look, what I'm asking for doesn't have to be a 60-page report. It may be very, very well just a map and a covering letter to say that the two are integrated, but it would be appropriate to make sure that
Yeah, so we could.
there's been some thought.
Mr Deputy Mayor, I think the simple solution is that don't try and make the consent do the integration. Because if you do, you try to do that, you've actually just changed the DA of what you're considering it, and you can't do that. That's not on. So what you can do is, outside of the consent requirements, is to work with the consultants and the landowners and say you would be better off managing this as an integrated approach rather than as two separate DAs. So the staff can do that in terms of talking to the landowners and the consultant and saying it would be better if you actually did this as an integrated approach rather than just two separate projects.
And given the consultant that I recognise, I'm assuming it has been done, but just positioning of flumes and discharges, that you don't want them in contradiction with each other when above and below are the same catchment. So it could very well be a simple integrated map and a letter. It doesn't have to be a condition of consent, but I think it is worth staff pursuing it. So if you want to add it as a fourth dot point so it doesn't mix up, it doesn't mix up the conditions that you, the council discuss with the applicant, council staff discuss with the applicant and the technical advisor to ensure that the two plans are complementary. At 64 and 66.
Maybe just put it in brackets 64.
64 and 66 Brooklyn Road.
Can I confirm, Councillor McManus, that the mover and seconder are amenable to that being added? Yes, thank you. Councillors, is there any further debate? Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Jones to close. Councillor Jones.
Control, we've had so little of it, and we're seeing in our own budget that we've had to install new position of compliance officer. I don't want to repeat what Councillor Frost mentioned, and Councillor Turner, but it is critical that we look at how we can maintain control, and this is one way. I also want to mention that this is not a designated development. There's a lot of confusion in the community who have been sent legal advice from submitters that would indicate that this is a designated development. And having harassed our staff enough and double-checked and triple-checked, it doesn't meet the requirements for that, in my opinion, and I'm basing that off the professional advice of our staff and the legal opinions that they have sought in the past when we were looking at similar developments. What concerns me is that residents have been sent this legal advice and they think that we're doing the wrong thing by making this decision during what is caretaker mode of council. Because once you reach 25 submissions on that, we would be in breach of caretaker mode. So I just wanted to clarify that on record, that this is not a designated development. And my final thing is to thank from the bottom of my heart the planner. We're going to name him because everyone knows who he is anyway. Jeremy, thank you. Thank you for all the hours. And to Julie, she has not missed a phone call, responded to every single email and has worked above and beyond. And I just want to thank you for being so professional and pragmatic, and for when I asked for a VPA, could we just try? They just went and did it, and I'm so glad that we got a really good result on that, because I think the community needs some acknowledgement that their road is going to, the life of that road is going to halve, and this acknowledges that there's something in the kitty to send a truck out and to fix some potholes or get around to getting it into the next schedule of roads. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Can I just, from the chair, also extend my thanks to the director and the staff. I know that this has not been an easy item to deal with for both staff and councillors, and I know that councillors have also received a barrage of emails and phone calls and text messages and everything else. So for us to have looked at all of those submissions, wound that all together and conducted a peer review is certainly a commendation to the hard work of our executive and staff. So thank you, councillors. I will now put the motion that is before us. All those in favour? Councillor McManus, Councillor Turner, Councillor Jones, Councillor Frost, Councillor Burgess. Against? Councillor Reid. Councillor Ferry, who's currently in the chair, will be abstaining. Craig, could you please bring in the mayor? Thank you.
Which is a vote
Point of order,
against.
Mr. Goodman, I'm not sure that you can abstain and stay in the room.
about to say the same thing.
I think you just voted against
You
the
voted
motion.
against it.
through you, Mr Deputy Mayor, that abstaining from voting is a vote in the negative.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't be in the room or need to leave the room. It's just that it just gets recorded effectively as a vote in the negative.
What Councillor Frost is saying, the only way to actually have an abstention is to leave the room.
Yeah.
You leave the room, then you're not for or against. If you stay in the room and abstain, you actually vote against. So it's a negative.
So for clarity through the chair, by me
That's how
not,
they can not vote.
sorry, through the chair, as the chair. So as the chair not declaring a position either for or against is not a thing.
It's a negative. You voted against.
Does that
And
mean?
councillor Harkin's just walked into the room. I haven't actually declared the vote. Councillor Harkin, you've entered the room. Thank you. I haven't declared the vote yet.
I'm going to stay out to declare the vote because I haven't been here for the debate.
That's a wise move.
Councillor Rand.
So it's through you, Chair, Mr Deputy Mayor, is that,
The councillor is voting against.
okay.
Through the chair, clarifying that position.
I just want to clarify the numbers and to understand that that's not a casting vote. I don't think it was, but I just want to clarify.
It's not a tie.
There'll be two votes against.
There's two votes against.
Two votes against.
I think one of our staff has gotten lost. Councillor Frost, could I ask?
No, they saw us and then
They ran?
they ran.
Yeah.
Should I just keep running the
I
meeting
just think we
or?
weren't quite finished. She's coming in now.
I heard Madam Mayor's denial that you went the other way.
Just like I just
Alison.
Not many. Was it weak?
Okay, thank you, councillors. Thank you, Deputy. So the next item is 6.7, alcohol-free zone. I think there was a slight suggested change in that alcohol-free zone in terms of the recommendation.
Yes.
Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to that?
So this is the recommendation before you now that has a dot point of 3, appropriate signs being placed at the entrances to the walkway beside the Memorial Hall, indicating that consumption of alcohol is prohibited. I have a question before we quit it, if I may, for the director. Some businesses are suggesting that it becomes a problem when they go from one establishment, which is licensed, I believe, to the next one next door, which is BYO. Is there anything that we can add to this to allow for that business's hours, for example, that this is in place, for example, from 8 p.m. onwards? So it allows for daytime business.
So can I just clarify you in relation to just the part 3 of the recommendation, or?
Oh no, sorry, that one is to stay as it is, but I'm just talking about the re-establishment of the because for the during business hours, I just want to get clarity on what that means.
So essentially what the second part of the recommendation is saying is that any premises that has a liquor licence or allows for BYO and they have an outdoor eating area, the alcohol-free zone doesn't apply whilst they're operating their business. So it doesn't apply to their outdoor area while they're open. So people can have alcohol in their outdoor eating area at any time, and the alcohol-free zone doesn't apply while the business is open and they're trading, essentially. Once they close for the day, that part of the footpath, the alcohol-free zone does apply. So essentially, if you're open and trading and you have the outdoor eating area, you can have alcohol on the footpath as part of your business. Once the business closes for the day, the alcohol-free zone reinstates. Does that make sense? we're trying to give flexibility to those businesses who have outdoor eating areas to be able to continue their trading without being affected by the alcohol-free zone. Once they close for the day, the alcohol-free zone does apply in that part of that footpath.
So just for clarity, for example, if one business has a license and there's like an emporium that sells it, and the next business is BYO, in order to get from where they purchased it, if it's open, if the liquor is open, are they in breach? Like, is the person in breach if they go onto the footpath to get into the area where they're going to order their meal?
Yeah, potentially, yes. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any way for us to massage this to allow for that kind of scenario for our local businesses?
I don't think you can, because it's a licensing requirement.
Yep.
If they go to a licensed premises to their bottle shop and grab a bottle, it won't be open or shouldn't be opened. It'll probably be put in a brown paper bag and they'll walk out of the shop and they can walk up on the street. Provided it's not open and they're not drinking it, then that's okay. As soon as they get to the BYO premises, they can then open the alcohol and have that with their meal. So that's a licensing requirement. It's nothing that we can do.
Yeah, the scenario I'm talking about is the time to taste setup with the Emporium one, and I don't know, maybe a bit of cheese was offered at the time and the bottle was open, but it's just something that could be an issue. I'm just wondering, do we tweak the hours so this is only in operation at certain times, or would we just say give another liquor license for the next door?
The hours of operation are effectively the hours of the business premise.
Business premise, yes.
So the silly thing would be is if you allowed it any extension of that time, someone could actually stand in an outdoor dining area. The business is closed, can continue drinking, which would be not in terms of the spirit of the.
Okay, look, I just wanted to square away that curveball, and I'm happy to put the motion there.
Okay, do I have a seconder for the motion? Thank you, Councillor Frost. Does anyone else want to speak for or against it? Councillor Frost.
I'd just like to thank the staff. That is very, very inventive and very clever. And no, it is. It's very well put together. And
Yes, no, thank you.
and as for the bits and pieces, it will be effectively enforced by our local police force who will use their judgment as they always do and do it well.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak for or against it? Okay, I'll put the motion as it stands. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Moving to the director, there's only three, so I'll just take them one at a time. Riverbank, 7.1, Riverbank Park Adventure Playground. There was, yes, a slight amendment.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Jones.
Yes. So the motion has 4 points: that the adventure playground design continue to be refined, and when I say design, I mean where the wild things are, U1, in light of the community feedback, and including an embankment slide, carousel, the hamster wheel, and if you're wondering what that is, have a look at Empowra Adventure Park, the removal of the springer and the removal of the spinner net and climber. And that the GM be approved the final design in accordance with delegations during the caretaker period so that we can get on with it. The existing playground equipment be removed as part of this project and be disposed of in accordance with our procurement disposal policy. And thank you to the community for their participation. It helps us immensely when we get such a great response and such detailed response. Some of the feedback, sorry, I better wait for a second.
Can we have a second at this stage, thanks? Councillor Hope. No, not on this one, she hadn't spoken to it yet, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Frost, though, that's okay. Very keen.
On the community feedback, I just wanted to say that it was really valuable. I think we got a lot of information about what people wanted, including but not limited to shade sails. That's come through on both designs. I think the experience of parents and kids in this kind of environment is that you're not having fun unless unless your bottom's cool on the slide, essentially. Also, we got a lot of comments about water play, and I didn't want to put this motion without mentioning it, that I want to see a lot of this feedback, and I'm sure the staff will do it, enter into other park design, particularly in Murray and Bateman, where we won't have hopefully have the flooding issues when we have our Category 1 park there. I would love to see some of the ideas about water play introduced there, and I'm sure our Director of Infrastructure is cringing because all this means moving parts and water and playgrounds and kids, and good luck with that. And a lot of comments about active play as well, wanting parts that could be moved and shaped and create future engineers. So no pressure there, but yes, so certainly we're taking on board also the comments regarding fencing. So all of that detailed design will go back to the GM, and hopefully we get to see the final product and play on it too.
Thank you. We have a mover and second. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against it at this stage? Councillor Frost.
Madam Mayor, about 10 or 12 years ago, I went to Palmerston in New Zealand, and they had a park there that had a flying fox that had a hamster wheel, although I'm not sure it was called a hamster wheel. And I looked at it and thought, you can never do this in Australia because of the insurance. And I was pretty sure I was right. And but I've seen this process, and although I've been a little bit sceptical at times of some of the early designs and so on, you've come up with something with a hamster wheel and a flying fox. And nobody has mentioned the I word at all. And I'm absolutely wrapped, and I'd say congratulations and thank you.
Great. Well done. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against it? I'll put the motion as it stands. Thank you. That's everyone. Well done. Moving to 7.2, Yass water treatment plant upgrade project update. Obviously this is a report just noting us, updating our information on the progress. So move Councillor Ferry, second, and Councillor Turner. Thank you. Was there any questions, any additions?
Just the
Question,
I
Councillor
think it's a
Jones.
standing question.
Yes, you can.
How are relations with DPI, and have they come round to our way of thinking? Like water on a stone, we want to wear them down.
We had a wonderful working relationship with Povo Water. Have they come around to our way of thinking at this stage? Not yet.
So we are working through with DPI Water. We've worked through a number of other things. DPI have also realised that they've had issues in their working with the community and working with councils. So they are looking at an alternate plan. We have lost one of our water engineers to DPI in that position. So hopefully we will get a good relationship with DPI through their engineering branch, given that one of their engineers is from here who has dealt with the situation in the past. So I think that should give us some advantage, and so we'll hopefully work with that going into the future.
And dare I say, he has a very clear understanding of our opinion.
Most of it's his opinion.
Yes, it's also his opinion as well, which is exceedingly helpful. Okay, so we have a recommendation for noting the update of the report. I have a mover and a seconder. Any questions? Anybody? Okay, all those in favour? Thank you. Moving, Jeff, if you'd like to pop out. We have a request for a lease for the pool manager's house to be used by Yass FM. Nominal rent. Does anyone have any questions? So moved, Councillor Turner. Thank you. Councillor Harker, seconded. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Jones and Councillor McManus. My apologies. Which hand was going first?
I think this is a great idea. As we can see from the Victoria Park Master Plan, we can't get a residential income from this, and this keeps it occupied in all the right ways. I just wanted to Yeah, I just wanted to get clarity, sorry, I lost my, it's a big business paper. Just get clarity that this was not an unsolicited request, that this was something we worked in lockstep with Yass FM as part of the process to find them a new location out of the water treatment plant, old water treatment plant, thank you, not underwater.
Yes. Through Madam Mayor, yes, so we've been working with Yass FM now since April, when we discovered that the water was ingressing into the old water treatment plant, to look for alternate sites. I think we've looked at about 8 or 9 different sites now that we've been through. This one came up because the rent ended, and we realised that we weren't supposed to have someone in there as a residential rental. So this facility came up, so we took that to Yass FM as part of long-term discussions with them. So this wasn't something that just came up out of the blue. This was actually something that we saw could benefit both council and you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Director. I just wanted to put that on the record, Madam Mayor. And can I just say before I finalise my part, community radio is so important. I fully support this lease situation. My first start in journalism was at a community radio station, reading the newspaper for the print handicap, and that was my commencement into media. It wasn't at a big shiny broadcast team; it was at a community radio station, and during some of our most important moments, our local radio station has been there for us, including when COVID occurred and we couldn't get any information from the Yass Tribune because it literally seized up. There was no one putting anything even upline and nothing to buy at the news agency. And so I commend council's support of this community organisation. A lot of volunteers are doing incredible hard work up there at the moment. They are pre-recording all of their programs. That is a heavy workload, particularly for volunteers who do other things as well. And the sooner we get them into a suitable accommodation, I think that organisation will be very, very grateful, and the volunteers too, who are putting in double or triple the amount of work in their own homes at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor McManus was next, thank you, and then Councillor Wood.
2 questions. How do we ensure that this is as it says, a temporary measure? It's only saying 12 months, but obviously they won't be able to move until we get something over at the men's shed. So how do we accelerate that problem? And does this need, because we're subsidising them to the tune of $250 a week, does this have to appear in our subsidies and rates and charges document that we prepare every year, because we actually are subsidising a group and we don't want that subsidy to be a 10-year subsidy. So how do we deal with those couple of issues? Please.
Through the Mayor, yes, it will need to be recorded as a subsidy in the financials. In regard to the timing, I'll refer back to the engineer.
So Yass FM are well aware of the requirement for a short-term lease. The issue with the location is that it is in the pool area, and if we do go to building a new pool, that will be the line for them to move out. We've already started work with Yass FM on what they need to do as part of moving down to the men's shed, and as part of this resolution, we've asked council to agree that so that work can continue.
So the imperative to move isn't 12 months, or it isn't a time deadline. It's when we decide to build them the heated pool, so they can stay there till we build the heated pool. So that's not the solution we actually want. But don't we need them to actually relocate as soon as we possibly can down to the med shed? Isn't that the intention?
There isn't 3 saying that. They've got to get.
There's nothing to make that happen though. Because I mean, 12 months' time they won't have moved. Because there's no reason to move. If the reason is the Olympic pool, the heated pool.
Through Madam Mayor, if it's a 12 months lease, arrangement, then if they want an extension, it comes back to council.
One more question, if I may, through you, Mayor.
Yes, councillor Jones, I've also got one.
I'm concerned about the idea of pledging a subsidy of $250 or whatever against this organisation. The reason being is that we don't have the same terms accessible to us. We can't, under the new Victoria Park Master Plan, actually go and get residential rate, the commercial rate or residential rate for this. So I'm concerned that we be fair in our reporting of what we're actually giving this organisation, because from my perspective as a councillor, I actually see it as a benefit to us to have an organisation lodged there, given the sensitive location of that building.
So I had a similar question, because my understanding from the information I gathered is that we can't rent it out for $300 a week anymore because it's not a residential place. So could we rent it out for $150 to somebody else? Maybe, but not $300. There is a nominal amount of
My point is that it is a nominal amount and it needs to appear in our rates and charges, and so in fact we are subsidising.
yes.
I don't care how much it is, but it needs to be reflected. If it's not reasonable at 300, then that's okay. I don't want to be unreasonable. I'm happy to say it's 150. It's a $100 subsidy, but the fact is we're subsidising them, and it's a temporary arrangement because they need to find a permanent home, which has been identified down towards the men's shed.
Councillor Turner.
May I ask a question without closing the debate? As a mover?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Can I ask the finance officer how the fact that Yass FM has been sitting up at the waterworks for no rent whatsoever for this length of time has been handled, and in actual fact council will now be $50 a week better off rather than getting a subsidy?
Through the mayor, I can't tell you why it happened in the past, but I can tell you that from the time that I'm here, we'll be recording it as a subsidy because that's the way it should be recorded, and in fact it should be recorded at where they currently are.
Thank you for clarity. Okay, any other further questions, anyone? Councillor Harkett.
Sorry, it's the same similar question. I understand why you're trying to inquire a subsidy, but no, because if it is, it is. But if we can't actually rent this out,
We might be able to rent it out for commercial,
use.
I thought the premise was we couldn't actually rent it out as it currently
not
is
as a
given our
residential.
So
plans. So how have we defined the line of what, the 250?
So
Do
it's
that one.
the amount that we decide is a reasonable rent will be the amount that we will put the difference to the subsidy. It doesn't have to be what we are currently renting it out at,
Okay.
but if we determine, a determination is made that a reasonable rental for a commercial would be $200 a week, then we will do that, but we won't be putting it down as at $50 because a commercial premise wouldn't rent for $50.
Thank you.
Sorry, the challenge with this site is that it needs to be for community use. Even just straight commercial is not appropriate. It has to be community use, and so there's not a broad market for community use. So while and this will be an assessment we'll have to make, but once you start limiting that it can't be residential, it can't be commercial, it has to be community use because that's the designation of the Crown land, then there's not a wide range of options, so it won't be a large rental, I would suggest. But that's, sorry.
But it will be something.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, we've done it to a whole lot of other organisations, and we've done it in our fees and charges. It is purely there for transparency, because you would hate someone to say, oh, you give the radio blokes or the radio girls a free ride. No. There it is. It's in the fees and charges. There is an income stream. We've made the assessment. It just adds to clarity. That's all it is.
Thank you. Do you need to close the debate?
No.
Good. All right, councillors, you have a motion in front of you. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Can we invite Jeff back in? Thank you. Right. Tracking, okay. You have a home.
I have a home.
You have a home.
So we need to do it upfront.
Okay, so moving on to, we have a few in this one. I'll just run through the 8 items under the Director of Corporate and Community. 8.1. Annual report. I think end of term, I've got a couple of comments myself. Investment and borrowing report.
Yeah,
Oh, you have a question? Sale of land for unpaid rates. Okay, you'll be right. You'll be right, councillor McManus. Draft, Deb, do you want to get out for that one, do you?
yeah, well, I made a decision about what I thought.
No, that's absolutely fine, absolutely fine.
It was definitely not a growl, it was definitely not a growl.
Draft councillor expenses and facilities policy. Code of meeting practice. Oh. Okay, can I have a mover and second of 8.5, 8.7 and 8.8? Councillor.
8.7.
What?
1, 2.
And 8.8, I'll have it, yes, please.
Councillor Ferry moving 8.5, thank you so much. Councillor McManus, thank you.
No, I'm not involved in that nonsense.
All those in favour? We've got 8.5, we've got one out of the way, there we go, all right. 8.1, I think it was councillor Harker.
I'm happy to move it as well.
Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Councillor Ferry.
Thank you, so just a few questions. Firstly, the report has evolved into such a better state than it has in any other year, so thank you so much. It's transparent, it's visible, it's much cleaner. If you remember the first report we all looked at some time ago, it was a very challenging read. Thank you, well done. I think it leaves it for the next council in a much better state than we found it. My question was, I think you've included an additional item, which is the material budget variance in here. And my question is specifically to, I think when we actually budgeted, and appreciate some time ago in many moving parts, we didn't have a budget deficit. I mean, we didn't say have a financial deficit at the time of budgeting. It was a slight surplus. And I just wondered, do you mind just clarifying, you put in the first part of your report, just the operations deficit due to capital grants, and you mentioned it was a timing, and in accordance with, I think, the legislation that we've had challenges with over the last 5 years. Is it the same principle that's applied that we have been back and forth on accounting standards?
Through the mayor, yes, it is the way that grant funding is now needed to be recorded in accordance with the accounting code.
Okay, I suppose why I ask that, is there any lessons we have learned from this that we need to know for those hopefully returning next financial year?
Through the mayor, yes, the lesson learnt is if you get grant funding, do the grant.
As in don't accept grant funding in the last, right at the end of the last quarter?
Well, yeah, that will happen no matter what, if a grant is available and you need it and it's towards the end of the financial year, there's always going to be carryover. It just happens that workloads, rain, all sorts of things have prohibited the completion of works, and there's such a big amount to transfer across.
So I suppose what I'm saying is this is potentially something to warn the new incoming council of straight away, that this is something that they should expect.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, just to remind you that your motion up there is what you discussed the other at the briefing session the other night, which was to add as part 2 about the audit office for service.
Can I make an amendment to that, please? We have to work with the audit office moving forward, and we are conscious that we're not content with the service. But the poor service, to my understanding, that you're referring to there was about their timing. Was it more than just their timing?
More than just their timing.
Yes, through the mayor, it was more than their timing.
Okay. Could we think about using the word service level, about their service level?
Yes.
When we can be direct and say poor, but timely?
Untimely.
I like that.
Let's get straight to
Untimely service, yeah. I just think poor is, you've got to work with them. And I know they didn't do the right thing, and we deserve to have that consultation and conversation with them.
Yeah.
Thank you for your suggestion.
And we have the same poor untimely service every year.
Yeah, it's not actually, it's good.
Sorry, she hasn't finished yet.
Yeah, I know.
I was about to say, if we don't say something about it,
Sorry,
it's not gonna
Councillor
change. So I think you're right, we'd be brave and we say something, but we just be respectful.
Councillor Frost.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's they actually plan a system that doesn't allow us to be able to respond and so it's not necessarily the individuals, although that's an additional problem. But the planning for it is just so poor that we can't comply and still have timely reports come to council that we can consider them in a proper order, and we're prospectively agreeing to things that we haven't seen and all sorts of things like that. And that's really poor planning. It's not just and if the staff are not good as well, then you really do have a problem.
Very frustrating. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against? All right, we have a motion in front of us. All those in favour? Thank you.
Here, I'd like to see my the sun on it.
That's right.
That was just my,
I've forgotten we brought that in there, sorry.
Oh, of course, it's not.
just makes preview of us.
Who turned it off?
It's a lovely Yass summer's day.
It's not, it's a sauna. Did we get one of them?
Yeah. Once a year.
Okay, moving to 8.2, annual report. Councillor Frost, I think, you mentioned down there.
Madam Mayor, I'm quite happy to move the recommendation.
Seconder, thank you. Councillor Reid.
Well, Mayor, I'd like to make a couple of points. First one is rather interesting. I had a look at the number of employees here, and I think it's 145, something like that. Which is almost exactly the same as it was when I first came to council in 2008. And we are doing lots more with the same number of employees. Yes, I'm sure the computers are faster and all those sort of things as well. And we've got different systems and those sort of things. But I think it's quite remarkable that we haven't increased the number of employees. The other thing, and I'll just note on that we have disproportionate numbers.
Have you seen us going yawn?
Sorry.
Disproportionate numbers of males in our lowest employment and lowest paid employment. Very much so. And councillors might want to, particularly those councillors going forward, might have a look at that and think how we might actually address that. Because it is a problem. I think we probably have disproportionate numbers of males in the very highest as well, but in the very lowest is where I'm.
Squared up here.
Yeah.
Squared up here.
Yeah.
Not counting me.
I'm looking forward to the time when I have time to notice these things. But the other point that I'd like to make is I'd like to just draw attention, and this is as good as anywhere, to the work of the Memorial Hall Committee, which get a huge run in this, but actually did a lot of work, both in terms of meetings and in terms of work that they did behind the scene. And it's culminated in a comprehensive plan and a comprehensive submission for grant funding, which hopefully was successful. And I'd just thank the members of that committee in particular for the work that they've done, but also the staff who've done a very, very good job in preparing that. The director and Mr. Stevens and other staff, I'm sure, who've all contributed to it. And it's an excellent job. And as I say, I'd just like to thank them for their work on this wonderful work.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments they want to make in relation to the annual report? Okay, all those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Moving to the end of term report, we had a slight variation, which I just wanted to include. I think my suggestion was to include all the names of the timber bridges, just to recognise the enormous number of the bridge work that has done, so that we are one of the few councils who has got actually our timber bridges under control. And I just thought it's timely to actually just include that in the term report.
So through Madam Mayor, up on the board there is budget addition has been being provided as part of the resolution.
Thank you. So what I was also going to do, I'd like to have a mover and seconder if I could for that. Thank you, Councillor Reid, Councillor Ferry. But I was also going to give, because it's end of term report, and I think this is as good a place as any, if any councillors, because quite a few of us are not running again, and some are running again, hopeful to be back on council, and I wish you all lots of luck, and hope you are. But I just want to say a few words, particularly someone like Councillor McManus, who's had 25 years on council, which is an extraordinary level of service, and Councillor Burgess is 25 as well.
26.
26, so
Less for
that's...
life, says less for life.
I just want to acknowledge that's an extraordinary commitment particularly from you two. We've all made a commitment, I do that, but I do want to acknowledge the fact that you two in particular have gone above and beyond most people in terms of time that you have committed to your community. So a big thank you. But I also want an opportunity if any other councillor wanted to speak now as we are about to retire. Councillor Turner.
If I may, Madam Mayor, the general public tend to forget that these two elderly gentlemen are actually the major repository of the corporate knowledge of this council. And although they're going to disappear, maybe, Cess may be back, but Michael is certainly going to be, the loss of that corporate knowledge is absolutely dramatic, and the general public are probably not aware of it, and they should be made aware of it, because Mike knows where all the skeletons are buried, and he remembers things that even senior staff don't remember. He has a prodigious memory and invariably is never wrong. They're going to be a great loss.
Don't tell my wife that.
I think he might offer himself as an advisor, maybe. Well done. Thank you. On behalf of the community.
Councillor McManus, would you like to speak? Because I'm certainly going to.
Okay, I will, Madam Mayor, I'd like to say thank you. I've had an absolute ball, and I've been very privileged to share this room on behalf of the Yass Valley community for over 25 years, 26 years. And I'll start with the one negative. I can count on one hand the people that have in the community that have genuinely upset me. But that 4 or 5 doesn't match the 16, 17,000, 18,000 people that I've had an absolute ball serving and working with. Particularly like to thank staff, senior staff, general managers, directors, but also not so senior staff, although some of them are quite senior because some of them are still older than me. But office staff, people like Sue have been an enormous, and Cherie have been an enormous amount of support, an enormous amount of help. Sometimes we're not supposed to speak directly to them, but because we run a reasonably casual arrangement, the general manager has given us some discretion talking to those staff. Some of those staff came up with some great alternate ways of doing things. Whenever I go for a walk, I cross Chinaman's Creek and the archways across that bridge, the use of those archways come off the old Yass Hume Highway. They sat in a paddock for 15 years. We had no idea what to do with them. And Rick Tilley, who was one of the leading hands on the road crew, the boys came up with the idea of creating a faux bridge across Chinaman's Creek, and they'll be there for another 100 years for people to enjoy. So it wasn't just senior staff, but some of the junior staff, outside staff, inside staff, and the young people from the office. I look back on the 25 years and I think of some of the things that we've achieved. Woolworths, new dam, sewerage refurbishment, pipeline and water and sewer to Murrumbaven, with a financial understanding that if we ever have to do it to Bynalong or Bowning, hopefully Gundaroo if they're listening, that we have a plan that the older communities, those who are connected first, subsidise the next one, pay that off, subsidise the next one, pay that off. So as a community of the whole Yass Valley, we all get access to those facilities of sewer and water. Cross-regional initiatives like Bald Hill has been an enormous success for us to correctly dispose of waste to landfill. I also I'm very proud of not of the things that we have to do, but the things that have made our communities' lives more pleasant. So we have to do water and sewer, we have to do rural roads, but the things that people really do notice, mothers, walkways, footpaths, and the extension of the footpath network, which was virtually non-existent when I came here 25 years ago. We used the state government's 50-50. We now have a magnificent river walk and walkways through most of Yass. We have some at Bowning, we achieved some at Bynalong. We've got gravel ones in Gundaroo, and I drove to Gundaroo and Sutton the other day, and I noticed the winery one at Murray Bateman, which will probably be the biggest network of all, will be a spectacular asset linking small business wineries back to accommodation, food and the village of Murray Bateman. So those things make our passive recreation more pleasant. But if we look at every single sporting facility in Yass Valley, at Bynalong got a new shed. I hope it's fixed up the connection to the ground. There's not the steps still there. You still maybe on your list. New sporting facilities at Bynalong, Gundaroo, we're about to commence. Sutton, spectacular achievements at Murray Bateman Rec Ground compared to what it was 25 years ago. And then back here in Yass, when you think of O'Connor Park, giving them a proper Aussie rules fair, which we extended, plus lighting, plus the spectacular netball courts that Alison and I opened. And then back over to Victoria Park, the new change facilities at Victoria Park. And then when you go to Walker Park, what we've built up there all in the last 25 years. Some of it came out of ratepayers' money, some of it was combinations with state government and federal government. Those things have made our lives more pleasant. Not as functional, but more pleasant, and I think that's what I look back on in my time that I've really have enjoyed participating in. I've got a list of things that you can carry on with, Chris, so after the meeting I'll give you those. There's a couple of things that haven't been done, including a toilet at the cemetery. And just for anyone that is watching, as frustrating as the community gets when things move very, very slowly, it is equally, if not more frustrating for the 9 of us in here, which we can see an urgent need for change, but getting things to move in local government does take a little bit of time. It is a bit frustrating, but it has been an absolute ball, and I think the 9 of you and the previous councillors I've worked with and staff, it's been a ball. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm only a newbie. I came here in 2008, so I'm about 13 years, so I'm about halfway apparently. And if I'm halfway, then I'm going off for a half time. I'm going off to half time for oranges. I might come back. The reason I say I might come back is because I have enjoyed myself. It's one of the current candidates sort of said, what's it like being on council? And I said, you'll learn an awful lot about yourself, and you certainly do. And your fellow councillors get to know a fair bit about you as well, and they know your quirks and your whatever. And I noticed, thank you for the gift tonight, that you noticed that I like to talk a fair bit, and you've given me a stage, or given us a stage for Yass FM, and I'd say thank you for that. And we will make good use of it, and so on. Thinking about, I'd agree with all that Councillor McManus has said, and although sometimes Councillor McManus and I, actually we did better when we disagreed, but when we agreed we inevitably failed.
Very true.
However, yeah, I'd agree with all of the things and the comments that he's made about being on council. And I thought, am I leaving the place a better place than when I came? And it's always a good test. And sadly, I don't think we have. I don't think it's the fault of anybody in this room. I think, unfortunately, our state governments, and particularly our state bureaucrats, have made us a less happy place. One of the things that are about to come here is the talking about the how we conduct our meetings. Apparently, we're not capable of conducting and setting up and conducting our meetings ourselves. We've got to be told in infinite detail. Inevitably, the things that are missing out of that when I came here, and I think there were even more before, things like questions without notice, things like, you can argue about all of them, but to my mind, they made a really robust democracy, and they made people interested because they could see what they talked to their councillor about happening in the place where the decisions were made, and it made people happier. And I think unfortunately, local government has been crushed a bit by the bureaucrats from other areas, and I think that's really sad. I don't, as much as we all love getting grants, all grants come with constraints, and more we are doing things in relation to the constraints and less to our own decisions. I would like to think that I will keep trying to open it up and making local government so that it goes, not necessarily back to that, but just something that is more responsive to the community than we were able to make it nowadays. And I think that's a little sad. To the 4 councillors who are going again, good luck, and good luck both in the election on Saturday, because I don't think you'll need it, but good luck. And could I say to you all, as I say, I'd like to talk a bit. I won't be here to talk about, and I'll be expecting to see these councillors speaking up more. Even Councillor Jones, I think, needs to speak up a little bit more sometimes. And but you are carrying, as Councillor McManus says, you are carrying. You're carrying the experience forward, and you'll need to work very hard to do that. And the very, very best of luck with it. And again, like Councillor McManus, I've had a ball. I've learned a lot about myself, and I wouldn't have missed a minute.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Reid. Councillor Harker.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks very much to everybody for the last 5 years. You made it really interesting for me, and I hope I'm here in 25 years' time or 20 years' time.
Thank you, Mark.
So thank you.
Councillor Harker.
Thank you. I'll be equally concise. Just want to say thank you so much, particularly to the staff. It's been an amazing couple of years. I do believe we've left it better than we found it. And for me particularly, it's the financial piece. I think that's in a much better position than it was potentially than when we came in. Really want to say good luck to those returning, hopefully. You guys are great councillors, and we talk about the corporate knowledge that is potentially leaving the room, and I hope it's retained with you for coming back. Just want to say a special thank you to the Economic Development Committee and the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, to the community people that came in and helped us through all those difficult processes and contributed and gave up their time. I just wanted to make sure that they were acknowledged. It's been very fun. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Jones.
I don't do concise, sorry. First of all, I need to say what was unsaid here. Mike has been a force of consistent, grinding energy when it comes to getting the Murrumbidgee School across the line. And when I first met you as a councillor, I was like, what can we do for this community? I turned up to a working group in Mike's house, and after that meeting I thought, how do we convince him to run for council? And so it obviously worked, and here he is. And the feather in your cap, Mike, is not just helping our community achieve the Murrumbateman School, which is just life-changing for families in Murrumbateman. We know that there was a 35% turnover of real estate every year in Murrumbateman because it was just too hard. So they don't know who to thank when they turn up and they buy their house in Murrumbateman now and enrol at the local school in 2023. And I'm just very grateful to be a part of that WIP. I'm very, very passionate about a lot of things that Mike is. And of course, he's the unofficial mayor of the rec grounds. And I'm sure whether you're on or not, you'll continue to let us know what needs to be done.
Yeah, certainly.
Alison, I've just so enjoyed having Alison on council. She just hit the ground running in every respect. She's always so diplomatic. Some of us get a bit hot under the collar, but she's usually very diplomatic, and she's certainly brought a view on, or an extra view on issues like weeds, and really made us sit up and devote money in our budget to it. And it's important to have that voice on council. Otherwise, we just think, oh, it's all too hard, it's all too overwhelming. Well, you've got to start somewhere, and Alison helped us do that. So thank you very much. To you old cranky ones, you better be back, and you better be back. And you never know, he might know. I don't know, but it would be great to have Michael come back. And thank you for all of your efforts. He's given me a kick up the bum many a time on issues like, what are you doing about the solar? I said, oh, no, I've got to push harder. And sometimes you don't know where it's come from, but that little extra push has come from Michael on an issue. And I just want to thank you for being a very good supporter, and we don't always agree, but yeah, on the right times you've pushed me. Thank you. Jeff, you've always been someone I can go, I don't understand this. What's your view? And it's just been so great to see you do what you always do, which is never leave unsaid what needs to be said. And that's always been, I think, a great big floodlight for us about on where we should go with some issues. And I've really appreciated it. Thank you very much. Seth, I always appreciate your clarity. Just bang on.
Bloody boy.
I have learnt never to go after you on emotion because you've said it all. You're just very, you're very good at keeping your finger on the pulse of what the community needs and wants on an issue. And I just really appreciate sometimes when I've been on issues wondering, what do I really think? You have convinced me as a councillor we need to come into this room with an open mind, and on many an issue Kim's actually helped me make up my mind on issues. Nathan, your meticulous attention to policy and procedure made me cranky, to be honest, but it also taught me that I need to step up and do more on that. And so I've learnt a lot in this term of council, and you still make me cranky, but not as much as you used to. And it's been great to have your viewpoint on things, and I really appreciate it, because when someone's viewpoint is so different from you, it really makes you spin and think of things in a different way, and it helps us to be a robust council. And to our fearless leader, what a terrific reign you've had. Like I said, we may not have always agreed, but I can always agree that you are a terrific leader. You've always given all of us the opportunity to have our say and kept us in line when we've had our say. On a personal note, some things that I'm just so glad that I've been here to be a part of. In my first term, I learnt that as a councillor, you have to work with other councillors. It's just not going to get across the line any other way. In my second term, I learnt that if we pair with community organisations, the sum of the two halves becomes so much greater, and we can achieve so much more. And examples of that are the Binalong Skate Park, You know, that was just my first learning curve of like, this is a community that's done so much already, and you know what we can bring to them to make it happen. It didn't take much, but when community leads the way, it's easy for council to get on board. And anything that we can do as an organisation to help them lead, like if we've got a grants officer that can help community groups lodge their applications and give them advice, the synergy of that is going to come back on us and tenfold. It's going to be terrific, and hats off to the executive for getting on top of that and getting the grants officer position advertised. I can't wait. I mentioned the solar. I'm so glad we're actually doing it. I think it's one of those Waterloo moments, and I promise that we are going to look at the toilet at the cemetery. I promise you, because it's really frustrating when things are left undone, and when the to-do list is greater than the I've got done list. That's how I feel right now. That's why I want to run again, and because there's so many things I want to see achieved. This council has got ready the concept plans for the heated pool. We just need to get it across the line with as many grants as we can. The achievement up at Yass High, that is astounding. 3 new buildings, the T block, the science block, and now the community hall. The DA has just been approved, and thankfully our wonderful team in planning was able to get across the line without having to do too much work on how you get a piano on and off the stage, which apparently was like one of the worst things. Big issue. Yeah. Anyway, so that's now done and dusted, and the construction for that can get underway. And you know, that's going to have basketball courts and a great stage. And you know, if community can access that, you know, what an achievement in our time of government to have supported our local families and communities to achieve that. I'm really happy. Thank you for putting me on the Ginninderry Trust Conservation. I've learnt so much, so many professional people involved in that. I've got so many ideas buzzing around my head. I've already talked to Chris about what I want to see happen with street trees now that are in residential areas, because the level of design and interesting ways of doing things that I've seen as part of that, and how they're building walking trails. I'm just absorbing it all, and I can't wait to, you know, share it in any projects that the Yass community is doing. What else? Health, thank you so much for supporting me when I said I think we need a new Yass hospital, let alone a Yass hospital with maternity. And this council got behind that petition. The mayor did. Thank you to the councillors that said, yep, we can support this. It is such a great thing to know that we have a pre and postnatal midwife there full-time now. So that's been a bit of a journey to get them from none to some to a whole position. And to see that the state member has acknowledged that planning needs to happen for us to get a new hospital is really important, because that's about a 10-year process. Other regional communities have got that had got that commitment, and it took 10 years to achieve it. And given the state of and the busyness of that emergency ward up there, it won't be a moment too soon once we get that. So much to do, and I can't wait to see what the new council does, and I hope to see those that are running again back. In fact, I don't want to jinx anyone, but I really hope that you're back. And jinx. Yeah, I don't want to jinx you. But thank you for all your support while I've been on council. I've grown as a person. My children might say I've grown crankier. But it's been a real learning curve, and I've had a blast. Thank you.
Terrific. Councillor Ferry, you nearly up or down?
No,
You
I'll
done?
wait until second last or something. It's fine.
Did you want to say anything, Kim? No, you have.
You just said about this.
Sorry, it's been a long day. So, thank you. All right. Well, I'm going, Councillor
I
Burgess,
just
I'm
say,
going last.
like, thank you to all you councillors sort of supported me, and the staff's been magnificent to me. And these girls, they've always helped me in the offices if I've had trouble, because I haven't got much education. It's just bush education. That's all I've got. I did correspondence and it was hard at school. But I'd like to say the best thing I've seen this council is in bridges being built all over these creeks and rivers, so that everybody can get in and out, because the Yassra Road, I know it still gets blocked, but at least you can get out now. out to Berrabanglo Road and all those places. You can get out now, you're not stuck in there anymore. And it's been a long time. There's a lot of things like Woolworths, the water, sewerage, water the Burrup Open, the sewerage out there, all the parks and things we've done. I think we've done a lot for Yass and the villages. And I just hope my colleagues that's run again gets back, and I hope these other people will come back one day and have another go. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sis.
Thanks, sis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wrote a speech, I didn't like it. I wrote it again, I didn't like it. I wrote it another 2 times, I didn't like it. And I've even scrawled notes at the beginning of the meeting, I don't like it either. And the reason is there are no words. There are actually no words, Madam Mayor. It's been an incredible experience. I feel very lucky to be here. I certainly know that election was an election for many of us to remember. Many things happened. There were many candidates, and there were many events that occurred during that time. And having run previously, and I might speak to individuals or comments about individuals' dinner, but part of the reason why I'm here is actually Councillor Frost. Councillor Frost was the youth council councillor presiding at the time, and he actually approached me after the meeting and had said, look, you seem reasonably switched on, and you care about issues in our community, youth issues in our community, and maybe you should think about running one day. And so I did. And the biggest trigger, as we might remember, was that park and ride with those trees up near the museum. But look, at the time I joined a ticket. We now have 4 out of the 5 on that ticket. If you think about it, it's only one of it. There's only one of us missing.
Mike's pretty
He's too busy doing footy.
Yeah. So I often credit councillors Frost, Jones and Turner for the reason that I am actually here in the first place. As I said at the very beginning of becoming a councillor, it's always been about just doing a good job, being a councillor, and for me that's never changed. That's always how I've tried to do it. Look, there's plenty more I could say. Firstly, the other thing to note is that we've kind of hit a few records as this term of council as well. My understanding is that we've elected our youngest deputy mayor, our eldest deputy mayor. We've had our youngest acting mayor. We've had our eldest acting mayor. We've had our youngest councillor, and potentially we've had our eldest councillor. And I think that goes to show that election was really about change, and hopefully the community can see that they got the change that they asked for. And I think it's been for the better. Look, I wanted to say as well and acknowledge both Cess and Michael. I've learnt a lot. I've learnt a lot from you both, and coming in here as a very idealistic young person, and coming out still as a relatively young person, but certainly very, very tempered by what has happened over the 5 years, and have learnt a lot. And certainly I've appreciated sometimes Michael's banter, but usually the lessons that Michael's provided throughout these meetings. And I'll never forget the first thing he said to me, the first meeting of council, which is when we got iPads, and he picked it up and he said, Nathan, how do I get Candy Crush on this thing?
That only on it works.
So I just wanted to call out, and thanks for that. I wanted to also call out Mike and Alison. Mike and Alison have been councillors and friends who I've just simply been able to sit down with, have a coffee and reflect. And I would often say if it was councillors Frost, Turner and Jones the reason that I came here, it's councillors Burgess, Abbey and McManus are the reason that I stayed, and councillors Reid and Harker are the reason that I didn't leave. And I think that that is a reflection on the very considered and diplomatic way that you work as councillors and you work as individuals, and it's been greatly appreciated. It has meant a lot, and you've both been a rock for me as a councillor, and I greatly appreciate it. Madam Mayor, as I said, I didn't want to make a speech. I did it 5 times and I went, no. And it's partly because I don't believe in goodbyes. I believe it's more about until next time. Madam Mayor, it's been an honour to be your deputy over the time that I have done it. And we're very lucky to have you. And I don't, to be completely frank and honest, I don't think we know how lucky we really are. There's a lot of mayors throughout New South Wales who just don't show the same degree of dedication and passion that you do. And it cannot be understated how lucky we are. We have a mayor who's not only put the community's interests first, but has realised that that is also about the region and the state in general. And we've been very lucky to have Councillor Abbey, or Mayor Abbey, as I should say, in the role of, really crucial role of establishing that JO, the CBR JO, and acknowledging the work of the former General Manager, David Rowe. So I think that's been really important to call out. And there's, as I said, there are no words that I can say. So thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I turn to the staff now? Firstly, to our executive. I know that there are many old hands and many new hands on our executive, but your advice, your ability to work with us at times when I'm sure it's been very frustrating, particularly when there's been very different points of view in the room, and the ability to just deliver the facts, to deliver what options are available, and to get creative. I just wanted to point out tonight again that it's the creativity of our executive that achieves some of the best results. I think that really needs to be called out. Can I turn my attention to our General Manager, Chris Berry, and say that we may have the safest pair of General Manager hands in New South Wales. Chris, as I said before, same with the executive, is able to deliver us the facts with a good context and a good knowledge of history, and myself being a contextual person, that truly makes the difference in my decision making, and I'm sure it's made a difference in your decision making as well. Chris has always delivered us facts and has always, yet again, shown that creativity and been a role model for that creativity in coming up with unique solutions for our community that really make the difference. Can I thank Cherie? Because I know that Cherie has been here for a long time and served with many general managers, and I can imagine that, and councillors, should I add, and that is not an easy job. So I say that, and I thank you for all the work that you've done as well. So as I said, I didn't want to make a speech.
You did a good job.
Thank you. That was
a very long speech.
So as I said, Madam Mayor, I don't believe in goodbyes. I want to wish our councillors who are running as candidates the best of luck. I want to wish our councillors who are not returning all the best in their future endeavours. Please stay in touch. We'll have this conversation there anyway. And because I am partly in the way of a beer or a wine, I'll stop there. Thank you.
So with your indulgence, one more time. The bling is, we had lots of conversations about that when I first became mayor because it hadn't been out for some time, the chains, but I think we've all come to recognise that they're an important part of Yass's history and they should be out and about for other people to appreciate and enjoy. I don't know, we didn't necessarily agree, but I think we got over that, Michael and I, to start with. I'll try not to be too long. I've written a few words. 13 and a half years on council, 9 and a half as mayor. First female as mayor of Yass, so I'm very proud of both those achievements. It started with the Cobbler Road fires. The headlines, I think, in the Tribune at the time were baptism by fire, and it literally was. And then we're finished with the wettest year that we could imagine, and I know James is fully aware of that. I'm proud to say that as a group of councillors working together with our dedicated GM and directors and staff, actually, because they're a big part of our team, and I know I'm repeating some of these conversations, but I think we've actually achieved a great deal. I'm actually really proud of what we've actually achieved over the last 5.5 years, but also the last 13 I've been involved with council. And just to mention a few, and I know we've covered a fair bit of it, but I don't think anyone mentioned the Barton Highway. I can't believe it. It's mine too. So we commenced with the Barton Highway. We had a commencement of the Barton Highway, which is truly astounding after not just I, but everybody else in this community has fought long and hard for that. Completion of dam wall, Yass Murrumbateman pipeline, Murrumbateman Primary School, timber bridge replacements, a new hall for the high school, Crago Mill precinct is well underway and on track, and I think for the councillors, hopefully the 4 of you who get back, there's a great track forward to actually leave a lasting legacy for the Yass community and the whole of the Yass Valley actually, because I think it'll be a real draw card. We've done upgrades on amenities, buildings, parks, playgrounds, equipment, the new Riverbank Park, weeds management. And as mayor, part of those roles for me have been, and a lot of them are the fun part of the job, the citizenship ceremonies, Anzac Day, NAIDOC, Remembrance Day, radio and TV, which is not something I was used to doing, but I've got a little better at it. And I also know they cut and paste, which is really helpful when you mix up your words. Lots of morning teas, lots of changeover dinners, plenty of events and plenty of openings, and also acknowledging the CRJO, which I hope that what we've left is that we've become an important part of our region, the smallest part of we're one of the smallest within our region, but we are considered one of the powerhouses of sensible conversation, robust engagement. Our general manager is considered one of the elite part of the team and provides advice to everybody else in our region. So we have become part of a bigger community, and for that I think we have seen a lot of benefits, including savings on procurements, lots of little things, but also that big picture conversation where we are actually recognised as a force to be reckoned with, and I think that's a great part of that. I found this little piece of paper the other day, Alison and I, that was our last time we ran, and there were 4 commitments we made, and you know, it's always a bit nervous to actually make commitments and see how that goes. So the first one was roads, Barton Highway, and getting more dirt on roads, getting bridges done. And I think we can go, and that's not just Alice and I, we as a team have done that. More jobs. I think we've improved the relationship with council, people working better with council from 5 years ago particularly, to making life easier to create businesses. I don't know about you, but out there I see booming activity, which is fantastic, which means jobs, local kids having an opportunity to have a crack at things. Water, pipeline, we've already mentioned, but the water treatment plant is well underway and it will be completed, hopefully in your time, with fighting from James is breathing. And the other thing was rates. That was what our 4 commitments were. To work to make sure that we had more federal and state funding so that it took some of the pressure off our ratepayers to have to fund everything. And I think we have done that as well.
80.9 million.
Yeah, that's a little bit better than where we were 5 years ago, 5.5 years ago. So I feel that we as a group can actually tick all of those boxes. I know it was a commitment we made, but I think you guys all made those similar sorts of commitments in your own hearts and minds as well. Best of all, I've met some amazing people that I wouldn't have met before. You guys are included in that process. That's you guys as well. And of course, Sheree, who looks after us all. But I've met some people I wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to meet in state, federal, local, small businesses. Not being from Yass, I think that has allowed me to get to know Yass Valley better and what a wonderful community it is. And I'm proud to have been able to actually get to know people better on that process. We've had our ups and downs. We've agreed to disagree. We've had robust conversations, which is a really healthy part of council. But we've all come out of it with decisions being made in the best interests of the community as a whole. And for that, I'm really proud of how we've all worked together. You can't do it on your own, we all know that, and I think we're all acknowledging that today. We couldn't have done it without the dedicated staff. I know that's been mentioned before, but seriously, we're decision makers and priority setters. The hard work and the real grind is done by the team, and without them, we would not be able to deliver anything to our community. I think we've left some positive large projects underway that augur well for growth, prosperity, and an ever improving Yass Valley. And I'd like to say to the councillors running again, you all got my vote, so make sure you get on. And we need you back on there because I think the new councillors require and need some of that support and knowledge that you all carry with you. And it's a really important part of that process. So good luck with it all. Those retiring, you're right. You've all got my phone number now, the real one, not the council one. Don't spread that around too much. I just want to say I thank you all for your support. A team leader is only ever as good as the team that she leads. So thank you to all of you. Okay, back to the business at hand. Moving to the investment and borrowing report, October 21. Councillor Frost, I think you had a question.
Madam Mayor, I move the report.
Thank you. Yep.
I would note that we are very healthy in terms of the amount of money we owe
Moved and seconded.
and the amount of money that we have. And that looks very healthy. It's not that I want to thank everybody for. I want to thank the staff because this has evolved over my time quite a lot. I think it was first introduced in response to Lehman Brothers, which was a pretty sad and tough time, and maybe where we went to that. But it's the one standing item that I know of that's actually nobody ever questions because it's such good information, and it's good information because the staff put the time into making it good information, so thank you.
Moved by Councillor Frost, seconded by Councillor Turner. All those in favour? Thank you. And my apologies, I got a bit overexcited with the speechings. 8.3, we just needed to endorse the end of term report, so if I can have a mover and seconder for that. Councillor Reid, Councillor Ferry. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Sale of land for unpaid rates. Is that one? That didn't go through, did it? Or did it? Went through. Yeah. 8.6, draft procurement and disposal policy. Jeff, you wanted to pop out?
Madam Mayor, I'll move that.
So moved, thank you. Seconded. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everyone. Jeff can come back. You can come back, Jeff. We're cracking along now. We're cracking through them now. And look, I'm mindful of time. This is the latest meeting I've done for ages, so we did chat.
We're pushing up against your time limit.
We are. 8.7 draft, councillor expenses and policy. So moved, Councillor Ferry. Seconded, Councillor Harker. Thank you.
Give it to Councillor Reid.
Councillor
He goes hands up
Councillor
first. He's faster than me.
Okay. Any comments or questions on that? Draft councillor expenses and facilities policy, which will be reviewed again by the new council.
Correct. Look, I just didn't want to send it into the net without speaking to the issue because I think it's important that we do. This involves funds that are spent on us and the future council. I think it's an important step that superannuation be a part of it. As someone who has only just entered enough employment to regain superannuation injection into my superannuation fund, it hadn't been touched with a contribution since 2008. 5. So when we have women on council, we have to acknowledge that the role that you do and the hours that you put in is never commensurate with the payment that you receive. The amount of reading, the amount of community contact that's required, it is a labour of love as well. And so women can be, as the major carers of women, major carers of children in our community, they're already behind the career ladder in terms of getting back into the workforce. So if they do put their hand up for this role as well, holding down any form of employment, it's tricky. It's not impossible, but it is harder. And I wanted to acknowledge that this is a step in the right direction for getting greater diversity on council. And the option is there to take it or not take it. But it's great that it's going to be there.
Thank you, councillor.
Mayor, mine was a point of order, procedurally, is we just had a comment, not publicly recorded, thank goodness, but that we may be close to time, so I'm just curious if a procedural motion needs to be moved to extend time, and if so, I'll move it.
It's probably a good idea.
Okay, so moved, seconded, thank you, councillor Reid, all those in favour? Thank you. Keeping that in mind while we discuss, unless there's very concerning things. So, draft council expenses and facilities policy has been moved and seconded, all those in favour? Thank you. Code of meeting practice is adopted from the best practice guides issued by Office of Local Government. Do I have a mover and seconder for that? Sorry? Kim and Mike, thank you. Okay, any questions, comments? Councillor Frost.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I won't be supporting this, not because of even what's in it, although I don't like what's in it. This has been handed down to us basically from state government, said here it is, there are about 3 lines or whatever, very little that we can actually meaningfully change in it. And to my mind, it's an insult to this council and to the incoming council that they say we've got to be told from outside how we actually conduct ourselves and conduct our meetings. I find it insulting, and I think we can do very well and we can do better. And there are some things in here that I know there's a prospective councillor who has been a councillor here before who is very passionate about this, and I hope he comes back and enlightens his passion on it. But I mean, I think, and I'll be very pleased to support him wherever I can outside because I actually find this quite a document that has removed the power from the councillors, and then they've taken it and put it into the bureaucracy, not so much into the local bureaucracy, but into the bureaucracy in for their convenience in Sydney, and I don't like it. If they want to do that, they should make the rules themselves, not pretend and get us to say you have to adopt it. We don't have to adopt. If they want it, they enforce it, not ask us to adopt it and pretend that we somehow agree with it, because I don't.
Thank you, councillor. Anybody else wish to speak for or against it? All those,
20 seconds and under. Just to note that the local government is not a 3rd tier of government in its own right, that we are an arm of the state government. That was a reality check for me, my first term of council. So while I concur with Councillor Frost on his objection, and I support your objection in that sense, we have to play on. We have to, when you're on the field, you need the rules, and it's great that all councils have the same rules. Otherwise, I think, particularly professional executives can be exposed to the kind of questioning that should come through councillors instead of from the floor or not without notice.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving to the general. Sorry, a no. Sorry. Sorry, apologies. A no from Councillor Frost. Thank you. 9.1 local government special conference motion. This will go to the local government conference in February. There is a recommendation in front of you. Do I have a move and second for that? Thank you, Councillor Reid, Councillor Harker. Anyone wish to speak? Okay, all those in favour? Thank you. Moving to 9.2, guidelines for advisory committees and committees of council, which is to be endorsed and also will be, as are all the policies, reviewed by a new council when they have the chance to go through those things. So move Councillor Harker, Councillor Furry. Councillor Frost, you.
Yes, Madam Mayor, if I probably just ask the General Manager if I may. This is not the complete distinction about complete list of council committees. I think there are facilities committees, and the committee that I'm very concerned that does go ahead, because I think it's going to be needed very much over the next term, is the Memorial Hall Committee. Now, it's a facilities committee. It doesn't necessarily fit in these ones. It is an existing one, which is a little bit different to what the briefing says, but it is an existing one. Could the General Manager just explain how a committee like the Memorial Hall Committee will fit in the new system?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the framework that was endorsed by Council said that facilities committees would not be advisory committees, that they would be transitioned to incorporated bodies. There are several of the community facilities committees are pursuing that, and at least one has actually done that. With Jasper Hall Committee has become an incorporated body, so they're looking to take an operational role in managing the facility and under a licence arrangement with the council. For those committees that don't become incorporated, there is the option of them becoming not so much as an advisory committee, but like a committee that provides or a group that provides like a user group to provide advice to through staff to council in regards to how a facility might be operated, what improvements might be needed, how the maintenance might be prioritised. So they would become a bit more like a working party or a steering committee that we set up for specific projects. So there is provision in the transition arrangements for that to take place. I would tend to think that the Memorial Hall Committee in particular would, from the comments that I've received over the recent time, is that they're not interested in becoming an incorporated body as such, but they would still like to have a role, and that role would be more like a focus group to provide guidance to the organisation through that. So that way, there will be still a role for groups like that if that's what the new council chooses to do, and if there is interest in the community in continuing in that way.
And could I just a question? So it will be open to the new council though to make them an advisory committee?
Everything's up for grabs by the new council. Basically, what the whole idea here with this committee framework came through the ARIC committee. They did an audit of it. They suggested this was a better framework to manage committees and community involvement in council's decision-making processes. But that's up to the new council about what committees it will have and what it won't have. I suspect that a new council may wish to have a different set of advisory committees. We already know that the Community Access Advisory Committee has sort of been abandoned by default because we can't get anybody engaged to represent the community on that. So even though it's still on our books, it may be something that the new council doesn't go for. I suspect that we will have an Aboriginal Consultative Advisory Committee in the future. There seems to be a desire for that to continue, economic development. But again, it'll be up to the new council to choose what committees it wants and how, what terms of reference that they want to provide to that committee in an advisory capacity. So yes, they may well say, let's have an advisory committee for Memorial Hall. And again, they'll be review the membership, they'll review the terms of reference, and then if that's their desire, that's what administration of the organisation will implement on behalf of the new council. But yes, they will have the opportunity to reply.
Super quick, thanks Madam Mayor, hopefully a yes or a no. There was a lot of work put in by this council to make sure that the fact that we can meet virtually is cascaded down. Is
That's
that?
there. Yes, it is. We've made some arrangements in the operational
that's a yes.
requirements.
Thank you.
Okay.
Definitely. I think that's been a good thing to come out of COVID.
Okay, any other questions? All those in favour? Thank you, she's ready to go. Okay, we have one question with notice, which is in relation to the Southern Phone Reserve. Councillor Jones.
I'd like to thank management for their response. It's still unclear where these funds were actually spent. So we don't know on what project. We don't know whether it was a matching grant for a road or for a park. We just don't know. And this was a fund that I've spent pretty much a sleepless night thinking about all the projects that could have been. This could have been enough money to redo our Memorial Olympic pool. That's how much money we're talking about. It's enough money to buy some blocks to put affordable housing on if we really wanted to enter that strategy with a momentous kickstart. It's enough money to build a Category 1 park at Murray Bateman with a splash pad that will be the envy of both Yass and Canberra. It's a lot of money is what I'm saying. And we put it aside, well, we thought we did, as a restricted fund so that we could make that legacy decision. And as you know, I had I'd spent it at least 20 times over in my head when we made that decision, because we wanted to go out to the community and consult first and do something that was for everyone. So I don't think it's really fair to ask the current executive where this money has gone because they weren't there. But what we can ask them to do is to look. And with that, I think we also need to acknowledge that we have a special committee, the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee. So I have a motion that I'd like to put forward. That council note that current management reported to the December 2021 meeting of council that the Southern Phone Restricted Reserve was not created in contradiction with the 2019 resolution of council, and that the entirety of the funds from the sale of shares have been spent. And that the Southern Phone Restricted Reserve status be referred to the Audit, Risk and Improvement Committee for investigation as to where the funds have been spent and what process of council failed. Council requests how the processes can be approved so this type of error is avoided in the future.
Okay, so we have a motion.
I'll second that.
Councillor Frost is seconding. Question, Councillor Ferry.
Madam Mayor, it might be semantics, which I'm pretty good at. That was a bad joke. I just want a very dry sense of humour. We talk about spending of all the funds. Can we hand on heart say that? Because I note that we have the uncertainty, but I don't know if we can even confirm if the funds were spent, but were instead moved somewhere else. So that's my question.
Perhaps, okay.
Well, through you, Madam Mayor, I received advice from the General Manager that none of it is left.
Okay.
It went into consolidated revenue.
It was put into consolidated revenue when the payments were made back in December 2019. What failed to happen was for then that money to be journalled across into the reserve and protected as per the council resolution. So basically, at the end of the financial year, it was counted as income. The expenditure that was occurred in that same financial year was what it was, and effectively it was consumed, if you like, as part of balancing the books for that year. So that's where the money ended up because of that overlooking that, putting it into the reserve. In terms of what the money was used for, it's probably very difficult to trace, but certainly during that period, there were projects that we undertook in addition to what we'd already budgeted for. Matching grant money would have been one of the activities that we used during that period, and all of those projects would have been done with council approval. It's just that we weren't conscious of what we were doing at the time and how that money was used. And looking, it was a surprise as much as me, because I'd made the assumption that the reserve had been created and transferred. It's just when we actually looked at it and we received this question that we realised that hadn't gone where it was supposed to go. And by doing a little bit more digging around, it looked like it just ended up in the consolidated revenue in that financial year. So it's been dealt with. The suggestion has been made about a way forward in terms of how we could replenish that reserve. That's partly dependent on whether we run surpluses in the future budgets. That's one option. The other option is that we could build into future budgets an allocation to replenish that reserve and other reserves if need be. And that's the suggestion we've made in terms of how we can move forward in a positive way on that. There is going to be a need for the new council to look at the reserves and the quantum of money in those reserves, and about whether we need to replenish other reserves as well. So we need to, that'll be a job for the new council. Just as a side comment in relation to the Audit and Risk Committee, we do have that resolution that the JO is setting up the Audit and Risk Committee. It may be possible to run the committee prior to that occurring, early in the new year, with the remaining community members, knowing full well that the two council representatives on that committee are no longer on that committee as of Saturday. It may be that the new council has to temporarily appoint a couple of people to that to make it work, but that'll be an administrative thing that we will have to look at in the new year if that's referred. The other alternative is that you direct the staff to prepare that, do that work, and present it to a future council meeting. So we've got two options on how we can deal with that.
So the second part of that is just referring it to the.
We could ask staff to prepare material for the committee. So
The staff will do that anyway.
Sorry,
We would be doing that way. Just the only caution I mention is that just whether we can actually do that before it's run by the JO, and whether the new council wants to put two people temporarily affected on the committee until that JO facility shared service has been set up. We still have the community members at this stage. I think they were authorised to continue through till March next year, which was about the anticipated time that the new rules for committees would be proclaimed by the government.
Well, in that case, what is up there is doable and it gets reviewed. Okay. All right. Okay.
Madam Mayor, in the report, it talked about an amount can be transferred into the reserve this year. Fifth paragraph from the bottom. Is that money that can be transferred into that reserve, or is that surplus? The reason I'm asking is that the fact that this $700,000 didn't go into reserve, it actually went into consolidated revenue, which meant that you budgeted based on the 700,000, and next year that 700,000 is not going to be there. So the whole budget ends up having to be rewritten for next year based on there not being $700,000 in the bucket. You can't actually transfer money to reserves. You're going to have to actively pursue a surplus to recover the money. It's not lost, the money's been
The
spent.
money's not lost,
The money's
it's been
not,
spent
the
on
money's
projects.
been, very, very true, Madam Mayor, the money hasn't been lost, the money's been spent on things like the new swing, the new playground equipment, it's been spent on community facilities in the villages, it's been spent on the new push bike learning area down at Miles Franklin Park, but that money won't be there next year, which means that the budget have to be drawn up based on the fact that you're $700 shy. Well, that's what it's 784 plus the dividend, and dividend was 50. So anyway, I don't think you can actually pay it back. I think that's where I think you because you're 700 behind. You're 700.
The only
You're
way
stuck in the pocket. You're not
the only way
going
to
to
top
pay one back.
You're right. The only way to top it up is by foregoing
Other
future
projects going
projects
forward.
in the future
It doesn't make any sense either.
And that doesn't make any sense, and that's not fair on you council, and it's not fair on the community. So we've acknowledged that we haven't wasted it, we've actually spent it on the community, but it didn't come to this room for approval to do that.
Wasn't spent in the way that we thought we might be able to.
So the projects did come to this room,
No.
but we weren't explicit.
The allocations weren't, the allocations into grass, because it would have had to have come to this room because it was in direct contravention of our motion. It's just something that needs to be very mindful for the new council, because I don't think you can actually create that money back and you're going to be 700,000 short on your next year's budget.
Without by restricting the projects that you actually want to do for the
I
community.
believe it's been absorbed over 18 months, so that will mean next year's budget's one's going to be short.
So through you, Madam Mayor, the motion that's been put up on the board there doesn't talk about the suggestion that the staff made about in terms of how we might be able to replenish the budget.
I had a reality check when I realised it would be 4 terms of council to claw it back 50k at a time. Sorry, I know I'm talking out of turn.
The motion up there is
The motion is
acknowledging-
talking about just acknowledging that there was a mistake and also that to have the audit risk improvement investigate or review so that this doesn't happen in the future. So I think that's a realistic recommendation.
Because Madam Mayor, these types of reserves come from councils being a little bit adventurous. It does include the Kirby Jones land that council bought for 350, 400,000 20 or 30 years ago, and we then sold for the figure that's in the budget papers. So those initiatives of councils to generate wealth for the future, to put money into reserves, to build long-term assets, that's what we were trying to protect this from. So instead of doing that, the money's actually been spent on the immediate community and on immediate community facilities, and that's not a negative, that's just a reality. But in doing so, we actually have set ourselves this council set ourselves a hurdle for next year's budget because that money was in the last 12 months' budget. So you're starting behind 700 for next year's budget. So you can't get the money back. All we can acknowledge is that it's been spent. It would be really good if that committee could say, yes, it was spent on the Miles Franklin Push Bike Park, it was spent on playground equipment, if it was spent on the toilet at the cemetery, that would be a good thing as well.
It's been set aside for the toilet at the cemetery.
Toilet in the cemetery, you know, just.
I've been told that none of it was preserved. Sorry.
Yeah, so I don't think we can actually pay it back, Mr. Gilman. I think the opportunity it's not there, I think, and the challenge is too great.
Okay,
Which is a
so we
frustration.
have a recommendation in front of us, and I'd like to sort of wind us up being mindful of time, and there are people waiting for us. Is Councillor Frost?
Yeah, I'd just like to support the motion. I'd like to support this motion and say that Councillor McManus is exactly right. We're not behind the ball for this budget. This budget was drawn up with a particular income in mind and this wasn't part of the bucket. The problem was that the budget before was drawn up without this in mind, and then in would have been December 2019, there was an item that came through that said sale of assets, under income, sale of assets, $700,000. And none of us had the wit to say what assets, because we would have been told, because it was only the month before that we'd said no. none of us had the wit to say that, but the mistake had been obviously made back then somewhere. The point of this motion is to get somebody to have a look at those processes and make sure this doesn't happen again. We've got the people with the expertise on that committee, and they are the people to do that assessment. And by going to that committee, no, we are not saying that the council is assessing itself. So if it comes back and says, everything's fine, or we don't need to do much, or whatever, it's an independent outside assessment. It's not an assessment of staff on staff or councillors on councillors.
In that case, I'll put the motion as it stands. All those in favour? That's everyone, thank you. Moving to 3 quick minutes, 12.1 minutes of the Canberra Region Joint Organisation for noting. So moved, Councillor Furry, Councillor Harker. All those in favour? You can talk offline if anyone needs to. Minutes of the Country Mayors Association AGM and General Managers meeting on the 5th of November. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, mover and seconder. Whoops. Says Burgess and Alison Harker, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. And 12.3 minutes of the Traffic Facilities Committee held on the 3rd of November. So moved, Councillor Frost and Councillor Jones.
Madam Mayor, through you, just noting that an item of discussion did drop off that minutes, and it's in regard to Yass Valley Way, so I'll just make sure that the submitter receives a personal response.
Okay, thank you. Oh, me?
Yeah.
I looked, I said, oh, I didn't get it.
I know, we've discussed in detail.
And they're not going to change it? Maybe.
There's some things that they can change it.
Okay, good. Offline. Okay, confidential matters nil, close of meeting, and a big thank you to everybody.
Thank you,
At
everybody.
7:25, it looks like.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
So we're done.
We're done.
We done?
We're done.
Technically, we're still councillors until Friday night.